So, you know that friend you have that can always get anybody pumped up and excited about just like anything, anywhere? I mean, we've all got one. I have a friend who convinced me to go on a 3-day backpacking trip just on hype alone. But the world needs hype men and hype women, people to get us excited about things that we've gotten used to. And if motorcycling had to appoint just one hype person, I think Robert Pandya is the guy for the job. From marketing to media relations, hosting major events, and creating programs that introduce thousands to the world of motorcycles, Robert's pretty much done it all in the industry. In fact, he's so passionate about getting new folks involved in riding, he started the Give a Shift initiative. That's Shift with an F, which is a volunteer group of creative and experienced industry people who put their heads together to figure out a positive long-term plan for the future of motorcycling. Nowadays, Robert's helping host the best party anywhere at the Buffalo Chip in a little town you may have heard of, Sturgis, South Dakota, and he's only just begun making the best party anywhere even better. This is Robert Pandya. I'm your host, Mark Long, and you're listening to Driven to Ride. All right, Robert Pandya, you are on Driven to Ride. Thanks for being here.
Hey, man. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. You've had a long and storied motorcycle career. And so why don't we start at the beginning? What do most people know you for? Kind of what's your claim to fame?
Oh, gosh. Well, within the motorcycle industry, I've been around for a long time. In fact, there was a industry article that named me, and it called me a fixture of the motorcycle industry. So I thought, oh, great, I'm a sconce at this point. Awesome. But I've been in the industry for coming on 30 years now. And I started out as a salesman. I just literally was hanging around a Yamaha shop so much that they were like, hey, buddy, why don't we hire you? And so I went ahead
around here, yeah.
Yeah, I want you to make yourself useful, you know? And so I sold Yamaha motorcycles for a little while, and then I moved down to Austin, Texas. I was a service writer at the biggest shop in town. And then I fell into a photography career for a while, and motorcycling was sort of part of that. Mm-hmm. And I'm old enough that was during the transition from film to digital, right? So there's plenty of jokes in that. But the reality is I ended up meeting a gentleman named Bill Stone who had worked for Kawasaki and Can-Am. And he had just started with Aprilia motorcycles. And I met him at an IMS show in Dallas. Okay. And the IMS shows play a big part of my career. But I met him in Dallas, and I didn't have any friends there. I was sleeping on somebody's couch that I barely knew, kind of thing. And all I did was work. I worked my butt off, you know. And I was there from before open till after close and whatever. So he and I got along great, and he asked me to eventually to come work for him at Aprilia. And I thought, okay, well, I'll do that for a year. I'll make my fat $48,000 a year salary and buy some new camera equipment and go back to being a photographer.
There you go.
And that ended up deflecting my entire career. I did buy new equipment, but I ended up just staying on with Aprilia. I was with Aprilia for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
As their PR manager, yeah. And there was some overlap with Moto Guzzi at that time, and I was one of a handful of people, 3 people actually, to survive the Piaggio buyout in the States when Piaggio bought Aprilia, and then subsequently moved the organization to New York City. Mm-hmm. I managed to stay living in Texas where I wanted to be, and then still doing the job from Texas for quite a while. And then after I left Aprilia, I had an opportunity to be the spokesperson for the international motorcycle shows, which actually overlapped a little bit with my Aprilia career, but that's slicing the pie really thin. But I was hired by Tracy Harris and Jeff d'Entremont to be the spokesperson for IMS, and which was fantastic, an unbelievable experience. I was on the Today Show. I did tons of live radio and TV and stuff, and was the guy doing the interviews on behalf of the entire motorcycle industry. So, so my helmet size grew proportionately, right? So anyway, but it was a lot of fun doing that. And then through that, work and sort of being in front of the industry quite a bit, met a gentleman named Derek Scott, who was a fellow UT Longhorn, Hook 'em Horns. And he and I got along great. He was the marketing manager for Victory Motorcycles,
Okay.
the former Polaris brand there. And he invited me on to be the PR manager there. I met with Mark Blackwell down in Daytona, and ironically, it's where I did my interview at Aprilia too. So Daytona's been kind of good luck for me, I suppose. But anyway, I met Mark Blackwell there. Mark hired me as a PR guy, and I spent 10 years with Polaris. And then there was another one of these like end of that 10-year period overlap where I was both the PR manager for Victory and for Indian Motorcycle.
Wow.
At the same time, so that was fun, and I got to introduce the Indian Motorcycle brand, and then kind of decided that after launching Indian, that was pretty good, and I sort of set up my life fairly comfortably at that point, and had opportunity to kind of step back, semi-retirement a little bit, take care of my father until he passed away a couple years later. And then I got invited to be the COO at the Buffalo Chip, which is what I've been doing for the last 2 years, which is up in Sturgis. And I call it the center ring of the Sturgis Circus, And so we have the biggest acts, we have the biggest campground, we have sort of the craziest things, that you can do at a motorcycle rally, all sort of happen at one place at one time, and
yeah,
and I've kind of got the keys to all the locks. So like it or not, I know what the next acts are coming up, but I also know where the spare toilet paper is if we run out in the VIP suite. So it's life's a balance at this point.
Well, I was going to say those are probably two of the most important things too at Sturgis rally and everything. So had you been to the Sturgis rally up in Sturgis before taking the job with the Buffalo Chip a couple of times, or?
Yeah, I had. The motorcycle rally has been part of my professional career for 15 years. When I started with Victory, you basically had to go to Sturgis. That was, the middle of the American V-twin world. You had to be there. And so I did that and ended up meeting a gentleman named Lon Nordby, who was the sponsorship director at the Buffalo Chip at the time. And Rod Woodruff, who's my boss now and the owner of the Buffalo Chips, been throwing that party this year. It makes 43 years in a row he's been throwing that party. It's pretty amazing.
Wow.
And I had an opportunity to come on as COO, which is a great title because it means nothing. It's you're a little bit of everything, and it's probably the most flexible executive title out there. But it's one of those things where I get to apply my Gen X MacGyver skill set and do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. I've seen that it's billed as the biggest party anywhere.
Yeah.
What makes? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but what makes it the biggest party anywhere?
Well, I would say the first thing is that we're as inclusive as it can possibly be. And the demographics of the motorcycle industry, particularly when it comes to Sturgis, has generally been like, middle-aged white dudes, right? And
yeah.
But that said, we try and be we are as inclusive as we possibly can be in every way. We've hosted Biker Bells, all women's motorcycle event, and which ends up being like Women's Day is Tuesday at the Chip, and we've done that. I think this year was 16 years. And Tony Woodruff, Woody's daughter, has been instrumental in that. She's an amazing big heart and just a huge fan of women in motorcycling. And so, yeah, really, that's part of what makes it a unique place, right? We try and have diverse acts, so you can always find a place. And I think to get into a little marketing speak, the USP of the Buffalo Chip is that no matter like what sort of rider you are, no matter how much you want to ride or how much you're there for entertainment, or there's a place for you to hang out. There's different vibes and different sort of environments all the way around the Buffalo Chip, which I think is something that's unique to us. And so we've got like a Bikini Beach hangout spot and a new margarita cantina bar that I just helped put together last summer, and like a heavy metal bar. And, you just kind of pick your vibe, which could, over the course of a week, can change, right? And there's a place for you to hang out and feel comfortable. So I think that's the thing that's unique about the Buffalo Chip. And, we've got customers who come in, traditional shoppers with a bedroll on the front. I mean, straight out of, then came Bronson. And then we've got folks who are pulling in like $2 million Prevost with stacker trailers and hand hammered, Cobra replica on the bottom and
Wow.
matching CVO motorcycles upstairs. It's just like, holy crap, and it is the widest diaspora of motorcycling that I've ever worked around concurrently, and it all happens at the same time. And it's like, so it's a pretty amazing experience in place.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of like one of a kind, really. And no matter who you are, what you ride, you can find a spot.
Yeah, we've really been growing into the adventure market, and as the demographics of motorcycling are changing, it's not just a conga line of black fairing hardbaggers and touring bikes and stuff. We see a lot of scramblers coming up. We've got we even have it's actually a little bit of a throwback to the 60s, but we have like the Pull Start Classic with a bunch of Coleman mini bikes and guys out bombing around on mini bikes on different tracks and doing all sorts of goofy fun stuff there. So it's a pretty diverse place, and if you just look at it through a pair of stereotypical goggles, you'll find that area that looks like a ZZ Top roadie convention. I guarantee you can find that still.
Yeah.
But if you dig in a little bit deeper, it's pretty amazing, the variety of activities and bikes and personalities that you meet out there.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit more, because obviously, when you say Sturgis, that's what you think of, the ZZ Top Roadie Convention. But what are some myths that are out there that you can disprove after, spending some time up there?
Well, I think that the custom motorcycle scene is highly underrated. I think that what you can find in Sturgis that's really compelling is not only can you see like cool motorcycles that literally have come off the pages of magazines. Well, there's an old reference, Pages. That's actually a piece of paper now. Anyway, but it's you can see that, but you can meet the builders and you can talk to them about these people are real. Like Arlen Ness passed away a few years ago, but in Sturgis, you could walk up to the king of custom motorcycles, who fundamentally changed the language of custom motorcycles, and shake his hand and talk to him about his history and what inspired him on this bike and stuff like that. And that's, guys like, old school names, Dave Perowitz, and younger guys, Kevin Dunworth, and they're all there. And, and it's just really, it's amazing to be around those kinds of artists. And I think we understand as motorcyclists that, broadly speaking, we're a pretty approachable group. But even within our world, there's like a strata of like the untouchable, right? And but they're all really cool. That to meet up with women from the Jesse Coombs Foundation that are just doing amazing work. And to meet Sana Abbas is a friend of mine. She's with Jesse Coombs Foundation, and her day job is she's a diesel truck mechanic. And then she works with like therapy horses and stuff like that, and has built custom motorcycles. So it's like, we're all cool because we ride anyway, right? I'm saying
naturally,
but to meet like the kings of cool out there, I think that's one of the things. If you dig in a little bit, you really truly appreciate that motorcycling is the ideal mix of machines and humanity, and Sturgis is incredibly welcome.
It's clear that you've really got a big passion for motorcycles. I mean, nobody works in an industry for 30 years, plus if they don't have a passion for it. How'd you get into motorcycling? Where'd that passion kind of start and come from?
Honestly, it was all utility. And I think I'm 56 years old, and I think about being like sort of on the leading edge of Generation X on a regular basis, right? Because it's that marriage of analog to digital that Generation X has sort of a unique perspective in. So, friends of mine who had like boomer fathers and whatever, they tell stories about riding their Honda Z50 in the empty field across the street. And that's how and that's very like sort of almost cliched story of how you got into motorcycling, right? Well, my dad was a doctor and my mom was a nurse. So the last thing that was going to be in our lives was a motorcycle.
Yeah, they saw the all the accidents probably, right?
Yeah, they kind of saw like the worst case scenario kind of stuff, Yeah. And my mom was a lot more forgiving of it. My dad really kind of dug his heels in for a long time. But I think it was around about 1987. I needed to get around Waukegan, Illinois, where we were living. And I somehow talked my dad into co-signing for a Suzuki GN250. And I joked that it had ABS because it had drum brakes on both ends. And you could lock up that bike on the ice if you tried.
Right.
But anyway, but it was a turd of a motorcycle. I think it was $17.99.
Wow.
Some one of those blowout bikes. And I got him to co-sign for me. And that was my first loan. And that was the first way that I got around. And it was pure utility. It didn't have anything to do with it was just like, what could we afford? What was going to be reliable? And what was under $2,000, a $2,000 car, back then was probably a relatively decent car, but it was probably a Pinto or something like that. And so, yeah, that's how I kind of got into it. And then I fell in love with the elements of motorcycling, that sort of controlling the wind and the freedom. And all of that was through experience. It wasn't through, watching movies or having, a biker live next door or anything like that, So, which ironically, later on in life, we ended up having a Hell's Angel movie next door. So, learned a few things there. But yeah, it's that's how it all came about, and I think that's why I've never really lost sight of that enthusiasm and how I try and stay connected with that sort of wide-eyed new rider, and why I think it's so important for us as experienced people in this industry is to don't be so arrogant, take a breath, remember what it was like to whack the throttle open on an air-cooled 250cc bike that maybe made like 17 and a half horsepower, but was like a rocket ship compared to everything else that you'd ever experienced.
Right.
Yeah. So that's where it came from. And that route I've never strayed far from that.
Yeah. So it was safe to say you were pretty much hooked from the start.
Yeah. I wrote a story for a magazine, Ultimate Motorcycling magazine. I think it was called Rob Report Motorcycling at the time. And I wrote a story how when we were little kids, way before I got the chance to even throw a leg over a motorcycle, we were in front of Mann's Chinese Theater. And Dad had driven the rental station wagon with the wood, sticker on the side and everything.
Yeah.
And what I know now as a sort of iconic biker comes rolling up next to us, and he had this loud Harley, and I remember looking at the front wheel, and it was just idle. Everything was shaking, and it was such a placid place inside this gigantic American station wagon, but outside was like this cacophony and violence, right? It was just like happening outside, right outside my window. And I thought, how can a person control that? Or, and I'm like looking at the machine shaking away like crazy. And I remember very specifically, like sort of like allowing my eyes to crawl up to where his face would be. And just the guy was staring right at me. These white eyes like staring right at me. And he had a big black beard and he had this gigantic grin on his face. And he blipped the throttle and I about jumped out of my seat and he went, rolling off and I'll never know who that guy was, but if ever there was like a dark angel that planted a seed of motorcycling in my head, maybe that was the guy. And now, ironically, here I am in Sturgis, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of those guys and a bunch of others too. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, come full circle, really.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I got to grow my beard out. Maybe
Yeah,
diet.
right.
It's a little too great.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So you talked about new riders and your story about, kind of getting that bug and that seed planted as a little kid. I mean, riding around, I still, the suburbs of Chicago, I still have kids every once in a while, give you the throttle blip motion or the wheelie. So the excitement is still there and people still get excited about motorcycles. And you really one other thing that you've been known for is you've kind of been the evangelist of the power sports industry. Somebody called you that. And do you think that's true?
It's dangerous. I think ever since I got let go at J.C. Penney, when I was like 18, and I was like moping around for a day, and then I realized how stupid it all was. I've never been scared of being fired.
Okay.
And so I've always kind of spoken my mind a little bit about that. And I think maybe that's where that comes from, because I love the motorcycle industry and the people who are in it, but we get in a trap of only listening to ourselves and living in the forest in that echo chamber. So my background as a photographer and being, trained as a photographer and getting a degree in that and everything at UT is part of that process is this thing called constructive criticism or crit. And you'd sit with your classmates and you look at everybody's work, and it's not about patting each other on the back. It's about actually finding the flaws to where you can get better. And that's the goal of a crit in an art class. And I carried that with me because I think this is part of American culture, unfortunately, but criticism is always only seen as a negative, and it's constructive criticism is a positive in that. And so when I see something that's wrong, and I know other people know that it's wrong, it's like I'm not really scared to say it, because somebody kind of has to say it. And trust me, it's knocked me off of a few Christmas card lists, and there, and there's people I could name who've specifically said, don't listen to anything that guy has to say and whatever. And then years later, they kind of come around to it. So I think if anything, it comes out of that and it comes out of getting to be the spokesperson for the IMS shows and being the guy in front of the camera and being able to equally speak about the passion of riding a Goldwing versus a KX 250 versus a trike. I get it. I get all those different things that you can ride and how that particular person is going to enjoy it. So maybe it comes out of all that sort of stuff of still loving it, but not being scared to call us out when we're making mistakes or when I make a mistake.
Is that kind of what led you to start the Give a Shift initiative?
Yeah, it was kind of exactly that. So as I said before, I took care of my pop till he passed away, and I was kind of out of the industry a little bit. Still riding and stuff, but I wasn't paying attention to sales reports, and I wasn't interacting on an industry level. And I came back to an IMS show in Long Beach, and I knew a bunch of my friends were going to be there, and all I wanted to do was get together and I needed a crash course. What did I miss? And so
catch me up.
Yeah, so I kind of came up with this idea to kind of get a group of people together and have a candid conversation and write a report and just make it free. So what I thought was going to end up being a 6-pack and a pizza ended up being this like way bigger thing, and I put it out there that going to have this discussion, and you can stay anonymous if you want to. And so we ended up sitting around a spot in Long Beach, and we had a 3-hour-long conversation. And I wrote a summary report, and I also went through and we have a transcription of the entire conversation with sort of names and specifics redacted.
Right.
But it's literally a fly on the wall conversation. And now that is, I think 6 years old this year. Mm-hmm. And it's almost a bummer that a lot of it is still irrelevant. It's like, come on, man. I know evolution is slow, but let's go, and
we solve these problems. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of the catalysts where people thought that I was crapping on the industry, but it was a constructive criticism thing. It's like, no, let's take a look at this stuff and let's make it better. And if I go back, I can see where the industry has shifted, and maybe some of the language and the ideas that came out of Give a Shift have taken root, because we had a strong representatives from some OEMs. Most of them were too scared to send anybody, and people adjacent to the industry, people in apparel, people who are doing OEM training, magazine editors, stuff like that. And what's amazing is at that very end, I said, okay, everybody knows, nobody knew who was going to show up. Mm-hmm. So as they showed up to this facility, it was like, oh my God, you're here, And so the confidence of the group sort of went up, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the thing, I said, remember, if you don't want your name associated with this at all, you could be as anonymous as you want. So I went around the room, we asked everybody, and there was one person there who said, I work for a brand, an OEM, I can't have my name. And all of us were like, okay, we all understand who this person is, right? We all, he's well known in the industry, but he couldn't be public. Everybody else was like, no, put my name on this thing. It's been an important conversation. So it was really a powerful lesson that when we talk about this thing, we can be candid as a group. Mm-hmm. Because in our world, we know we can make a mistake and something can go wrong, and it might not be your fault. And I think that risk reward conversation, or that understanding of risk reward and what we do, really opens up. Once you get in the right setting, it opens up people to having what would be a difficult conversation about aspects of our world. Yeah, it was really rewarding. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. I wanted to ask what maybe some of those changes or ideas or whatever that have you seen kind of come to fruition, maybe in one permutation or another from that conversation? Has anything come to mind?
I think back about the women who were in that room, and there were some unbelievably powerful. Portia Taylor from Black Girls Ride, and Sarah Schilke, and Monique Phillips, and just amazing women in the motorcycle industry, right? And at the time, they were all completely sick of Shrink It and Pink It, which is just men's apparel. Just make it small, throw on some pink and purple, and they'll buy it, right? And what I will say is that the brands like Revit and Komodo as sort of a parent company, they have really addressed women's apparel as its own category. Women designers at Climb and stuff like that, really literally making gear that's appropriate for women. So the whole lip service of we need more women in motorcycling isn't served when you walk into the dealership and it's a bunch of boxy guy's stuff that doesn't fit your hips and all that kind of stuff, right? And the legs are too long and it just looks stupid. And so I will say that I can't, certainly I'm not going to attribute all that to Give a Shift, but I think that the language of that part of the report is something that was very easy for someone to turn around and go, hey, why don't you read this part, about women in motorcycling and see that it makes sense. And so, since then, the growth of Babes Ride Out and other, it used to be called the Wild Gypsy Tour, but events like that, these women-centric events and magazines and stuff like that, has been Women Riders Now is just an amazing outlet for that, and are invited to press launches for new motorcycles because that perspective is important. So that's maybe one thing that I'm really proud of.
Yeah, are you seeing more women riders up at Sturgis then too, compared to the past, whether as an attendee or as being with Buffalo Chip?
Yeah, 1,000%. I definitely seeing a lot more women come. Working, we're not final yet, but working with a women's group to help plan a ride in to this next year from Denver to Raleigh, and then that group doing stuff together. And it's a non-traditional to what we normally think of as a Sturgis group in any way. So I'm really excited about that because it proves that we care, and it proves that we are welcoming, right? And so, it definitely seeing more women there. more women-owned companies as well. So that's a big part of this. And it's not unusual anymore to see, a woman, custom bike builder, Jessie Coombs being, rest in peace. What an amazing woman. But she just she didn't just crack the door open. She threw the door open and was like, yeah, this is what I do. Come get dirty with me, and let's weld stuff. She was amazing and really just inspirational. So
yeah,
definitely seeing more of that.
No, that's great to hear. So I've never been to Sturgis. I'm hoping that I can make the trip next year. So what kind of talking about as an event in general, what are some do's and don'ts? What can somebody kind of set their expectations? Either at Buffalo Chip or at just Sturgis as a whole.
Well, the first don't worry about the trip getting there, because you have to, that's half of the thing. Is it takes some effort to get there, it's in like sort of a population vortex. There's not a whole lot of, people around. Right. So everyone who goes there has to, it's an effort to get, that's the point. This is the apogee of an epic trip. Right. And, if you want to make it easy on yourself, rent a bike out of Denver and just go ride up from Denver. Right. It's a fantastic 8 hours of riding, huge variety of terrain. And then you plop up into the Black Hills, and just as the sun is thinking about setting, you're just rolling up into, and then two is that there are different, campgrounds that have different vibes and have different facilities and stuff like that. Nothing around, unless you bring it and have your driver drive your Prevost, nothing around Sturgis is like super plush and super, schnooty, right? It's a very, very, very approachable place, right? And so I think that when, people think that, I can't walk down Deadwood Main Street, there might be a knife fight, I was like, that's such a BS excuse. It's like, if you want to have that fantasy, great, but it's not the reality out there. And it really is just a whole lot of fun, and the art, the entertainment, the environment. And I think if you go back to the core of how the rally started with Happy Hole, it was that this is a beautiful place to ride motorcycles. Let's get more people to come here and enjoy it. And the core of the rally is it is a beautiful place to ride any motorcycle. And so whether you come up during rally or you come up outside of rally, you have to come to the Black Hills and experience it on two wheels, because it's one of the most spiritual places I've ridden a bike. And that's not marketing speak. That's just falling in love with this place that I had to go to work. Trust me, I've had to go to a lot of places to go to work, and I didn't fall in love with them. But man, the Black Hills is really a special place. It takes the work to get there, and the reward is the gem. And the more people do it, the more you'll discover that. And you don't have to come for Bike Week. There's plenty of other things going on. So. But if you want that full experience, if you want to hear the sound of like a 300 Harley Davidson starting at the same time, or, I was like, it's powerful, man. It's great. And you see the most enthusiastic people on two wheels. They're there, whether it's part of the flat track racing or the hill climbing stuff, or the custom side of things, or the industry side of things, or the demo untold number of motorcycles. And it's just, it's a hell of a show.
Well, you mentioned, Black Hills being a beautiful place to ride. You've ridden for decades and decades. What's been your favorite trip that you've ever taken?
Is the one I haven't taken yet.
Really?
So I have, I cannot wait to go to Iceland and go ride, dual sport bikes in Iceland. I cannot wait to go to India and ride a Royal Enfield up in the Himalayas. I cannot wait to go to New Zealand and do a lap around New Zealand. My mother's from England, and I was actually born in Scotland, so I really, really want to go to England. And I have I have an extended relative who's actually a flagger for the Isle of Man, and so I'm like, yeah, I want to go. I want to go do that,
Yeah.
And one of my bucket list things is actually happening next May. We're doing Sicily motorcycle tours, hosts events to ride a lap around Sicily. And you can do it on a Harley or adventure bikes or whatever. And so me and my buddy Dennis from my Aprilia days, we've stayed friends forever. We're going over there, and there's a few spots left if you'd like to sign up. But anyway, we're going over there, and it's like once you get off the plane, they just sort of take care of you, and and it's all super turnkey. And to ride in Italy, where there's such a passion for anything of two wheels, and around Sicily, which is its own kind of thing, the way that Alaska is its own thing to America, right? So Sicily is kind of its own thing. I'm excited. I'm excited for that. So there's plenty of great rides in the States. Don't get me wrong; it's not all stuff that's over the horizon, but man, I can't wait for the next thing. I'm really excited for the next thing.
Has there been any place, I guess in the country, in the US or in the world, that you've taken a ride and maybe pleasantly surprised you with how cool it was?
I think now this is going to be gutsy to say this, I think, but New York City I was petrified, right?
Sure.
And again, working for Aprilia, and my first time riding a motorcycle in New York City was on the back of another guy's Vespa scooter. Right. To go pick up another bike for me. I had to jump on. Right. So, and of course he is a very Italian guy. Right. So he's riding with his suit on, and he's got the Vespa that's got the smallest freaking wheels, so you're just every pothole. And he's talking to me like backwards, like while he's riding through this. And he goes, it's just like riding in Milan. And I'm like, oh man. But I was really stunned by the motorcycle culture that does exist in New York City. And it's different, and it's hidden, and you have to dig. It's work to find it. But when you do, it's pretty cool. And then there's a little bit of gladiator challenge and just being in that environment. And I think the thing that makes it somewhat approachable is largely the traffic is really slow.
Sure.
And it's like riding in India. There's just like stuff happening everywhere all the time.
Organized chaos. Yeah.
Yeah. Significantly fewer like sort of large animals on the road in New York City. But, but it's a little bit of that challenge, And so that kind of, that was pretty amazing. And then the western slope of Colorado, for somebody who doesn't want to deal with that, maybe is okay with large animals. The western slope of Colorado, if you look at the town of Gateway, Colorado, there's a fantastic little resort there. And if you ride an adventure bike or something that's at least comfortable on a gravel road, if you look at Gateway, Colorado, south of Grand Junction, that entire area is like you're just near the border of Utah, and you can get over into Moab and go ride everything that's Moab. Highway, I think it's 141, if I'm not mistaken. It goes like almost 100 miles, and it's twisty the entire time, and there's not a stop sign or, it's like they made this road for motorcycles, right? And I mean, it's just really, really great out there. And the environments are different. I'm probably blowing one of my big secrets, but if you can go in the fall, when the aspens are changing, and you go all the way up into the mountains up there, and there's just beautiful, just come around corners and just explosions of color and stuff. And then you sort of breach out of that, and all of a sudden you're in the Moab desert, and it looks like, like Wile E. Coyote is waiting for you around the corner, or the
no joke
plunger of TNT. I mean, it's like it's such a big variety of terrain, and you can get really technical. You can hurt yourself out there. So, but at the same time, you can get on a TW 200 with a buddy, and you can chuff around like a billy goat, and it's spectacular. That's about as diverse as it gets, like Central Park on one end and Moab, Utah on the other.
Well, but that seems to be the way that you roll, man. I mean, everything from adventure bikes to Harleys to Gold Wings to a Vespa scooter, you love it all.
Yeah, two wheels and a motor is just such a compelling thing, and no matter what form it takes, I'm entertained by it. And I used to be a real super bike snob. I thought, like,
oh, really?
Why would you want to ride anything but like 1,000cc super bike? And now that's like the last bike I want to own. But it's just really an eye-opening thing, and it's so rewarding to meet somebody else who has even 5% of that inclination to be with you out there.
Yeah.
Because that's not a majority of the population. So
what made you turn the corner from only wanting to ride super bikes to kind of opening your eyes to everything? Was it like a specific ride or a bike or a person or just time in the saddle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's a boomerang question. It goes back to my friend Derek Scott, who was working with Victory, and he and I was with Aprilia at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We shared a gentleman named Will Tate. He provided service for our press fleets operation. It's like a one-man Hertz, he'd loan motorcycles out to the different journalists and stuff at our behest, right? So both Aprilia and Victory motorcycles were inside this garage, right? And I was like, big American V-twitch, I'm like, look at this Melee super bike over here, right? And Derek would call me up and he'd want to borrow an Aprilia. And him and his dad used to come out to LA and they'd go ride up the coast and stuff, and they'd borrow Aprilia. So I'm like, yeah, sure, man, that's cool. Just industry favor, not a problem, right? And then he would, hey, man, if you ever want to borrow a Victory, I'm like, why would I want to do that? And then like one day I was just like, okay, I just got to do it just so he doesn't ask me that anymore and whatever. So I got on a Victory Kingpin and I rolled out, and within 2 corners, I was like, holy crap, this is a good motorcycle. And it stopped and turned and it was comfortable and it did. And I was only going to keep it for 2 days, and then I was going to come back and pick up a Tuono and go ride the rest of the weekend. I had some buddies who were meeting up, and I said, you know what, I'm keeping this thing. And I ended up keeping that Kingpin all weekend, and I was riding with buddies on like 954s and VTRs, and they're all laughing at me. I'm on this Kingpin. And outside of like decreasing radius, super tight hairpin turns where the floorboards were just dragging like crazy, I was hanging with them.
Nice.
And I was so impressed. It wasn't like I'm a super bike rider. I was like, the bike was absolutely capable. And I'm like, and then it was comfortable on the ride back down I-5. It was like, right. I'm like, wow, you can have it. So that one weekend really opened my eyes to the category of American V-twin. And then my friend Paul James, who's still with Harley Davidson, Paul, I left Aprilia and I pitched a story to Cycle World magazine, and David Edwards and Mark Hoyer helped facilitate it. It was a story called Mother Road, RODE. And I flew my mom out to Denver. I picked her up, and then she and I rode a Harley Ultra Glide Classic that I think had like 602 miles on it. It's just barely broken in, right out of their press fleet. Smelled new. And we rode from Denver all the way out to Bonneville Salt Flats, and then took a right, and we went up to Crater Lake, Oregon, and that area up there. And then we rode down the Bay Bridge and stopped in Bodega Bay, which is where Birds was filmed. And my mom tells me this story that when she was pregnant with me, my dad took her to go see Birds because I was overdue, and he wanted to scare me out of my mom. So I'm like, I didn't know that story until we turned around the corner, and she's like, "Oh, there's the church from Birds," and
weird.
It was, it was like, holy cow, and so that experience on being on what I had considered before then to be just a useless lump of a motorcycle.
Yeah, stereotypical.
When I was clicking along at 70 miles an hour with my mom on the back of the bike, and we're sharing stories and life experience and the heartbeat of that bike, the pace of that bike, the gearing and the rhythm of it all was so perfect. Couldn't have, and we're riding past wild Mustangs and Wyoming and stuff, and it's like it couldn't have been better. That was the best possible thing. And so that's when I was like, all right, just anything with two wheels and a motor is cool, period. And it's just the environment you're using.
It's an awesome story.
It's only motorcycling that it wouldn't have been the same experience if I picked her up in like a Miata. It's just different, right?
It's just different. Two wheels makes it special. So, well, I think that's a perfect sentiment to end on. So, Robert Pandya, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great interview, and I've enjoyed talking to you. So, thank you.
Hey, thank you for the time. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the listeners who want to listen to motorcycle stories and all the work it takes for you to help put that out there. So, thank you from the whole community.
Cool. Well, thank you, Robert.
Thank you, brother. You take care of yourself. We'll see you out there.
Thanks for listening to Driven to Ride. Interact with us and check out full unedited conversations, photos, interviews, video interviews, plus other goodies on YouTube or Instagram at Driven to Ride Podcast. Or you can check us out at driventoridepodcast.com. And make sure you leave us a rating and review from wherever you get your podcasts too. Do you have an idea for an episode or a guest, or you want to invite us out on an adventure? Email us hello@driventoridepodcast.com. Driven to Ride is wholly owned by Flint Rock LLC, made possible with help from Matthew Miles, and written, hosted, and produced by me, Mark Long. We'll see you out there.